Hey, so I wanted to start this podcast off by acknowledging the fact that you can see me in my bedroom just looking the way I want to look in my pajamas and everything. And the reason for that is because I could not be bothered to go change and do everything because by the time I do makeup, I do the whole production, set up cameras and do all that. I'm already too tired to produce. And who's gonna do all that? So you're gonna get the real version of me in this coming up episode or seasons. I don't know, girl. You get what you get. Anyway, I want to first address the fact that the name has changed from Opinionated Child Rights Podcast to the Children of Africa podcast. And that is very strategic because I felt like I did way too much by making the podcast all about me. Well, it's supposed to be about the children of Africa. So I decided to make that change. Now, am I the opinionated child rights expert? Yes, because my opinions are everywhere. But this podcast is more than me. It's more than me. It's about the community. It's about the diaspora. It's about all of us. Okay. So I decided to make it about us as opposed to about me. Now, let's get to the gist. We always go straight to either the gossip and then we go into the context. Today, we're going to be discussing the case of Senegal and the children who are begging in the streets. But before that, Ghana stepped to the front. What did he do at the UN? What did he do at the UN? If you're listening to this and you're not watching on YouTube, good for you, good for you. But I just feel like I am so expressive and I need to show what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling at every particular moment. And in this very moment, I am just so happy and I'm realizing that my lips are ashy. So I'm going to use moisturizer. I won't say the brand so that when I start getting sponsored posts, you're going to be like, oh, you've changed. In fact, this episode is sponsored by my shenanigans. Okay. It's sponsored by my shenanigans. And that's why we're here. Okay. So next time when you hear a sponsored post there, you're not surprised. So I am prepping you for what is going to be happening in the future. Okay. Now let's get back to Ghana step here. So Ghana decided to go to the United Nations General Assembly and present the slavery issue and say, you guys, you have to acknowledge this as the gravest crime against humanity. Now, let me explain this in a way that will make sense to you, the way it made sense to me. There are two places you can take a matter. You can take it when you're talking about the UN. You can take it to UNGA, that is where they take it, the United Nations General Assembly, or you can take it to the United Nations Security. Okay. Now they decided to not go to the Security Council. They decided to go to the UNGA, and that was so strategic because strategic and tragic at the same time. Okay, not tragic, strategic because by going there, every country got to vote, and some people abstained. Every European country abstained. You colonizers, we saw you. We saw you. Argentina, we also saw you abstaining. Like, we'll talk about you. We'll talk about you. We'll talk about you. Let's focus. So, uh, when the reason it was taken to Unga is because they knew that it was going to pass, and when it was going to pass, there's going to be a woisho moment, and maybe it will be taken to the Security Council later, and then they're going to vote. Now, when it goes to the Security Council, that's where the veto power comes in. That's where US and Israel will be like, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this because they have veto power. Okay. But when it's the General Assembly, every other country can vote and things pass by to that majority. And that is what happened. So it passed, even though every European country decided to abstain. And we were like, hmm, where is the allyism? Mhm. And I understand they're like, oh my God, we cannot make this pass because slavery was not crime at that particular time. Yeah, the UN was not a thing during that particular time. Let's talk about that. You guys came to Africa, colonized the shit out of us, and then ran back to your country and formed this whole thing to start there to be like, oh my God, let us stop the wars and everything. And then now, when you complain that you guys did so many things against us, you robbed us, you killed us in mass murder, you uprooted most of us, you did all those things. The US has the audacity to be like, but then it was not a crime at that particular moment. Someone gave me a gun. Someone gave me a gun. Anyway, I digress. Ghana, we applaud you. We celebrate you. But then at the same time, I am feeling some type of way about all of this because for people who are like champions for human rights, you guys are the worst betrayers there is. You and Senegal, the country that we're going to talk about right now, have betrayed so many LGBTQIA plus people in your own communities. So you cannot be marginalizing a certain group of people back home and then going to the UN and being like, you people marginalized us. Like you're doing the same thing and then acting like now it doesn't make sense. So you're oppressing some people in your country, but then you go to the UN and say, you guys oppressed us years ago. 1 plus 1 is not adding to two. What is this? What is this? Like Ghana and Senegal have made it so clear that they're not allies to the LGBTQIA community. I wanted to call it agenda, and then I realized it's not an agenda. It's not an agenda, it's a reality. Anyway, there are so many studies out there showing that the propaganda against the LGBTQIA plus community in Africa is propaganda that is funded by the US and the EU. And that just breaks my heart because it's the same thing over again. These things are legal in your countries, but then you fund that propaganda in our parliaments for it to be passed. And then we have people leaving our country, coming to your countries to seek asylum on the same issue. They'll be like, hey, I'm persecuted in my own country, prosecuted in my own country because of my sexual orientation. So I come to your country seeking asylum. And according to international law, you have to let me in, right? Then I come into your country and you're like, oh my God, go back to where you're from. So it's a whole loop. So you create a problem. You create a problem, people run away from the problem, they come to your country to seek for help, and you're like, you go back to your country. If only you would just stop interfering, and then you would not have a problem. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about that? The same with colonization. You guys went to Africa, took their resources, raped their women and their men, dehumanized the whole entire continent, and then came to your countries and created borders. You're like, you guys are not supposed to be here. Then, when we have economic crisis in Africa, people come back to the EU and the Americas to come and seek help. And then you guys are like, no, you guys don't belong here. Everyone should be where they're supposed to be. You were not born here. Dude, you came to our country. You stole our resources. Where were these laws back then? Make it make sense, right? The fuck? Anyway, that is what has been happening. And I had to speak about that because it was just bothering me so fucking much. But now we are going to go into the podcast. And I'm so sorry because in this podcast, I have cussed so much and it's supposed to be child focused. And I hope if you're watching this and you're like, oh my God, this lady is cussing too much. My child cannot watch this. Close the fucking TV. Okay? Now, I will link down PDF story version for children, so maybe you can give them something to read, and that would help them understand what I'm talking about, and hopefully it can also help you if you're the kind of person that needs the visual and the audio all together in one. Now, I have been watching so many movies, but let me focus on the thing I want to show. I am carrying my earphones like this, the headpiece like this, because I don't know where to put it. But maybe I should just pin it on my shirt. Okay, that's gonna take a while. Senegal, I am so disappointed in you. Okay, let me put my baby down and then we start. Now, let me tell you the story of Senegal. Like, in fact, let me put my iPad down so that we can discuss this as adults. Senegal had a problem. Okay, sound like that guy on TikTok, like Kenya had a problem. William Ruto. Anyway, focus. So Senegal had a problem. Had a problem with the Muslim community and street children. So half. Okay, let me begin. In Senegal, there is this thing where Muslims, especially people in the Muslim religion, send their children to go learn about the Quran, and they send them to schools like boarding schools to go and do this. It's not somewhere where you go and then you come back. In boarding school, you go and sleep there. Now, in these schools, they became so monopolized in a way that the teachers in the schools, I think they were called Malives. I don't want to butcher these words. That's why I'm calling them teachers. That's why I'm calling them schools, and I'm calling them children. Okay, if you're Muslim, you can put the Talibis words in there. So, okay, so in the Muslim culture in this country, it's normal for boys to be taken from their parents or their parents to take these boys to Muslim school to learn more about the Quran and Allah and the Muslim faith. Now, when they do this, they expect that when they go there, they get not just Muslim education, but also every other form of education. But known or unbeknownst to them, they encountered an issue. Most of the time, when these children are sent to these places, parents have the expectation that they're going there to learn. But instead, they are sent to the streets by by their teachers to go and beg for money and other sources of economic relief like food from strangers in the street. And when I say begging, I mean begging. Tens of thousands of children are on the streets begging, like it's an organization of beggars for children. That is how it's perceived. Now they're on the streets begging for money for 6 to 8 hours a day. Now that leaves them with like 3 hours of learning. And when this case was brought to the African Committee of Experts on the Rights of and Welfare of the Children, this is how it was framed. Like these children are taken there, and instead of just getting a proper education, like in a normal school, how you would wake up, have breakfast, go to school, play, and everything, there was none of that. You wake up, you go and clock into work and beg and beg and beg, and then you have to meet your quota before you can either go to class or gain food. Now, most of these children were malnourished. Most of the children were had injuries because they were getting into accidents in the streets. Now, imagine that I've already told you it's thousands of children that are getting into this kind of thing. Now, most of them are getting injured. Most of them are malnourished. Most of them don't even receive the education they were supposed to receive, and their health is deteriorating, and nothing is being done. So Senegal was like, "Hey, we understand that you brought this case because we're doing this is happening, but we're telling you that we've tried to curb it to no avail. We have created legislation. We have tried to tell people that we're going to do ABCD if they continue doing this, but it's still happening and it's beyond us." And the committee was like, "Pause. What do you mean it's beyond you? You're not just supposed to be creating laws. You're supposed to be prosecuting the people who are breaking these laws." And Senegal had like at that moment only had like 5 cases because they needed in their judicial system, they needed you as a victim to actually take that case. Like you see how in Kenya someone can take a case on behalf of other people. In Senegal that could not happen. So you as a victim had to be like, hey, so this is affecting me and I need to report. But then again, you would face backlash. Remember, this is a religious kind of thing. And you know any country where religion is like instilled by, I don't say by force, by fire, because religious people be out here throwing hands. So it's a Muslim country. Take that where you're going to take that. And people were afraid of retaliation. Also, poverty was such a thing and is still such a thing to the extent that what are you going to do? Most of the parents who are sending their children to these places, they're sending their children there because they're assuming they're going to get cheaper or free education, free healthcare, food, and everything. It's like a way of relieving yourself from the economic crisis that is going on in your country. So you take one child or two boys there, and then you can survive on what you have at the current moment. Now, Senegal was not just doing this to their children, because people were from either Guinea-Bissau, Mali, they were transporting their children here. Some of the time, the children were trafficked from these countries to come to Senegal to participate in this. Remember, it's like they phrase it as like you're coming to receive religious education, but then in real sense, that is just a front. You're going to beg in the streets for your own um, survival in real sense. Anyway, so the committee was like, hey, you guys did not prosecute these people. We there's no evidence of you guys prosecuting people who were doing this wrongs to the children, and you had the knowledge of this, because you're coming here to say that there's nothing you could have done. There's more things you could have done, and things that are done by private people in your country and your government knows it's the responsibility of the government to protect children from any type of exploitation that is happening in their own country. And Senegal failed so much at this, and so the committee was like, hey, do not come here and say there's nothing you can do. There is something you can do. This is one of those cases of where the law is there, the policy is there, and the government wants to do something, but then it has not done something yet. And it has been going on for such a long time that it was starting to become like a culture, you know, something that goes on for such a long time that people are like, this is the culture. Like when your child gets to a certain age, send them there, they're going to be taught this and this, and then they're going to be taught survival. And then also there was the aspect of shame, you know, like if you send these children back home, or if they go back home, or if they go to Senegal and they realize that the life is hard and they escape and they go back home, they bring shame to the family because they're not learning the Islamic principles that they were supposed to learn when they go to Senegal. Excuse me. I wanted to hear what the committee said in terms of education. I'm reading from paragraph 50 of the ruling, the judgment. Okay, so the government must enforce its own laws to protect Talibés from this kind of abuse. Talibés have said it's those boys from this abuse, and ensure that education received in DRERAs, that is the schools, equips these children with a well-rounded education and does not allow any kind of forced begging. The Senegalese government enacted legislation in 2005 that criminalized forcing others into begging for personal financial gain, but the authorities have lately failed to take concrete steps to enforce the law and end the exploitation and abuse of the Talibés. Therefore, the government of Senegal has violated the right to education by failing to ensure the availability, accessibility, acceptability of the education and supervising the daughters. We talked about the 4 3 A's in the last case. I hope you still remember that. They were also held in violation of the right to health because, like I said, when these children were taken to beg in the streets, they were having literally they were being malnourished, and then they did not have access to doctors to come and see them when they get into accidents in the streets, and this led to their health deteriorating. And the fact that the government knew about this and they were not doing something about it was something that the committee rebuked in a Christian language, okay, in a Christian kind of way. I think rebuke is universal, even Muslims use that, I guess. But this is what they say: Senegal has the obligation to ensure that children are not deprived of the access to healthcare services and facilities. It should further take all necessary steps to avert any kind of institutional, cultural, financial obstacle to accessing healthcare services. The state should not tolerate any practice which violates the right to health of the children. It must assert that third parties do not deprive children of their right to access to health and medical services. This is something that the teachers of the Sharia law were like, hey, have you met your quota? Then where do you think you're going? Do you have money to go to the hospital that you're talking about? Get back to work. Anyway, they were held in violation of the right to health too. And then When it came to child labor, now you just think for yourself. Do you think they were held liable for this? Yeah, I knew you were smart enough to come to that conclusion because this is literally the definition of child labor. It's forced begging. They're like, you have to go to the street and get the money for yourself, and then after that, when you've met your quota, you can get this and this and this and this, and that is not even guaranteed. Now, what did the community say? I want to this time I'm reading directly to what they said. Okay, so this is what they said. Okay. In the view of this, the committee believes that forced begging places children in a harmful situation on the streets and therefore meets the ILO's definition of the worst form of child labor. This is the worst form of child labor. Moreover, the committee notes that forced begging and gross neglect is done with a view towards exploitation, with the marabouts receiving the children, the marabouts are the teachers, receiving the children from their parents and profiting of their labor, which resulted in continuous suffering of tens of thousands of children in Senegal. Okay, okay. It has also the government also failed that to administer effective measures against the marabouts and protect the children from exploitation. So, in real sense, what they're saying is it is the responsibility of the government to protect children from all these things. And the government failed to protect children, especially, especially from the issue of child labor. And that is true. Okay, now guess about this one. Protection against child abuse and torture. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think they were tortured? Do you think they were abused? Mm-hmm. You've come to a conclusion? Yeah. Smart girl. Smart girl. Yeah. Now I want to read for you what the committee said because this blew my mind. I was even taking notes in my book. Get there. Okay. As the UN committee of the UNCRC, this is such a long word. The UN Committee of the Rights and well of the Rights of the Child. Why do they not have welfare in their name? Anyway, let's get back to it. I realize I'm showing you all my hair products. Well, I don't have hair. Anyway, um, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child has stated that the prohibition against the physical and mental health violence also applies to corporal punishment in schools. The physical abuse likewise places the marabouts in conflict with the Senegal's penal code. So, like I said, they had these laws also. So, something that has been said by the UNCRC is also being told by their own laws, but they're still going against them. Like if you didn't meet your quota, they will beat you severely. And this is something that Africa is trying to wean themselves off because beating her was such a normal thing. Like when I was coming up and growing up, it's how I was disciplined in school, and it was not a good thing, but it happened. It happened. So when they didn't meet their quota, they were beaten. Anyway, the severe physical abuse that many marabouts, the teachers, inflicts on the boys, as well as a looming threat of violence, therefore violates the children's rights of freedom from physical and mental violence and abuse and torture. The government of Senegal, therefore, is in clear violation of Article 16 of the Charter, of the African Children's Charter, which requires that states protect children from physical, mental, injury, abuse, neglect, maltreatment, and torture. Now, the next one you can tell me if you think they were caught. Okay. Article 21 Protection against harmful social and cultural practices. Now, the practice here is the begging, and we've already said how harmful it was for these children. What do you think the committee said? I knew you were going to come to the same conclusion as me. Okay, so this is what happened. Using children in any form of begging is one of the form of harmful practices which is clearly prohibited under Article 29 of the African Charter. And this is so true. In fact, let me just read it for you from the African Charter itself. Yeah. Article 29, sale, trafficking, and abduction. Hey, what did I eat today? Sale, trafficking, and abduction. State parties to the present charter shall take appropriate measures to prevent the use of children in all forms of begging. And then also, this is how the committee defined trafficking of children. They said it's the recruitment, the transportation, the transfer, and harboring of kids for the purpose of exploitation in any kind of form. That is trafficking of children. And remember, these children are being taken from, sorry, other countries also to come into Senegal to do this kind of thing. So they were being exploited for that. And the committee clocked that and were like, hey, this, this is wrong. And you're also being held in violation of that. So they were also held in violation of that. Now, in terms of the next one, which is like a sub of the other one, is the violation of Article 29 in terms of sale, trafficking, abduction, and using of children in form of begging. And I feel like we've exhausted that one. And let's go to the next one. Now, I'm going to give you what the committee said and what articles online have said about what they think should have happened because they don't feel like the solutions were actually real solutions. So the committee gave like so many solutions, like from A to N, like that's way too much. But this case was such a heavy case compared to the other ones. The others we've discussed so far had a few violations that the nations were actually found in violation of. This one, almost everything that was brought against them, they were held in violation. And the committee took a very strict approach to how they provided the solutions and how they addressed each issue. And I love them for this. I love them for this. So the first thing they said was to ensure that the Talibis are immediately taken back from the streets to their families. Now, it's so easy to tell people to go back home, but you're not providing a solution to what the real issue is. These children are being sent here for education. Now, if you do not provide the education back home, and you tell them to go back home, and I said this is like a religious thing and it's something that can bring shame to your family, then they go back home, they bring shame to their family, and they don't have an education. You've not solved that issue. So many articles online on this issue were like, hey, if Senegal or if Guinea and Mali provided the right to education for free and accessible, it has to be accessible and available. You can say it in your laws 200 times, like the way Senegal has had said these things in their laws so many times, but then in terms of execution, it was not happening. The same thing was happening here. If you tell people to go back home and you're not providing the right of education in these countries, especially in a way that is acceptable and available, it's just not going to work. They're going to come back here. The second thing was through cooperation with the neighboring countries, Guinea, Mali, and every other country surrounding them. International and national organizations facilitating the reunification with the families. So they're like NGOs and the government of these countries that are sending children to Senegal should work together to ensure that the children go back home uh, the way they were supposed to go. And it makes sense, like I've said, to return these children back home. But if you do not give them a reason to stay home, they're not going to stay home. Now, the next one was to establish a functioning and effective institution and mechanisms to provide the children with short-term and long-term appropriate psychological, medical, and social assistance to ensure that they fully recover from the torture and the trauma that was going on in Senegal. Now, this was such a good approach. Like giving people counseling and therapy is such a good thing, especially for children, to ensure that they're weaned off this kind of thing. But then again, at that time, the financial situation in Senegal, I don't think it could ensure this happen unless with the help of international help like the UN and the AU itself and other organizations that were working in that region. The next one was to establish minimum norms and standards for all areas relating to health, safety, hygiene, education, content, quality, and accommodation. I have nothing to say. The next one is to integrate DARAs into the formal education system. I think this was the best thing that they recommended. They're like, hey, you guys are coming all the way here to learn about this. How about we introduce this to schools? You see how in Kenya we used to learn there was Muslim education and also there was Christian education, and these were electives that we get to do. No, first of all, they were compulsory for some point, and then they were electives. Now, this is what the committee was recommending to Senegal, and they're like, hey, instead of sending your children here, how about we make this, we incorporate this into your school curricula. Now, for this to happen, teachers have to be employed. Now, the daras that were doing it here, now they get to be employed formally and actually be paid by the government to do this instead of collecting their source of income from children who were begging in the streets. Now, this is a solution I can stand by. The next one was to inspect the daras regularly to ensure that standards set by the charter and the local legislation are complied with. Now, before the government knew of these issues and they were like turning a blind eye, now the committee was like, you need to go there and inspect and ensure that things are running there smoothly. Make sure the beds and everything are okay. Make sure children are being fed. We don't want to hear anyone who's staggering, malnutrition, and any other thing. Do your inspections and ensure that the schools actually meet the minimum standards that is supposed to meet before you actually give them the right to continue being like a school. The next one was with a view of fighting impunity and preventing forced begging, sale, abduction, and trafficking of children, ensure that all the perpetrators are brought to justice and held accountable with their actions. Now, every other person that was committing these crimes against these children was supposed to be held accountable and taken through the normal justice system in Senegal. Remember, this committee is about children and it was focused on children's rights. Now, the committee was giving Senegal the ball back. They were like, hey, these are the things you need to do to ensure that children are protected in your country. Now you dropped the ball the first time, and now we are handling it back to you, and we need you to do ABCD. And this part of this ABCD was hold those teachers accountable, hold those schools accountable, make sure someone is prosecuted for all of this. Now, did this happen? Someone from Senegal, please come here and help us. The next one was on the rights of education. This is how they expanded. They said make sure that the right that education contributes in promoting, developing the personality, talents, and physical and mental abilities to the fullest potential. So as they're drafting their education policies and curricula, they make sure that these things are taken into account and also ensure provision of free, compulsory, basic education. Now, this is one of those things that is mandated by the UNCRC and also the African Charter and also Senegal itself, like the issue of free education. But it's free education until to a certain point where the government can afford it. Now, let me explain this. The same way I explained last time when we were discussing, what were we discussing? The case of Uganda. Like sometimes the government doesn't have it. And this is a progressive right. So you cannot provide this right and then say you don't have it anymore. So you need to allocate funding in a way that this right is realized. There's no way for you to come back and say, hey, now let me pause. We cannot provide this. I will give a proper example because this is something that I've seen, like in Kenya. I'm going to use this example because I'm Kenyan. I don't have any other thing to give you. So in Kenya, our president decided that he's so smart. He's going to ensure that the right to education, especially for people in university and in high school, do not get free education at all because they don't have the budgeting. Now, the right to free education had been provided for us by the Constitution of 2010 and had been existing for almost like a decade. And then this man came into power, and now there's no budget for uni and also high school students. And people were like, how is that even possible? This is a progressive right. There's no way you come when you find us, we already have that right. People are going to school for free. You change the whole curriculum, and then now all of a sudden you're like, we do not have money for this. That's not acceptable. I hope someone is in court fighting this because it's crazy. Apply the same thing here. Now, what the government, what the committee was saying is you need to increase funding to ensure that the right to education is achieved for free for everyone, so that no children feels like they need to leave where they're living to come here, and no parent feels like they need to bring their children here because they can't afford to pay for them school fees. That makes sense to you? Okay. The other one, the government has to review their educational policy in light of fostering respect to human rights and fundamental freedom. We've already talked about this. The next one, the next thing, I told you they were told so many things, okay? So bear with me. The next one was to train law enforcement and judicial personnel, social workers, traditional and religious leaders, parents, and community at large on children's rights in general and prohibitions of child begging in particular. Like, if you're going to make this issue something that people understand, you need to start a campaign to be like, hey, this is why this is wrong. This is why you should not be sending your children to do this. And this is how the government is going to help you so that this is not an issue for you anymore. So they were told to do this, teach everyone, every stakeholder in the life of children has to understand the dangers of child begging. They cannot just see it as part of the culture. They have to dismantle that thing and make it as something that is not part of their culture. So they had to do that campaign. The next one is to do joint studies with the concerning neighboring states on the situation of Talibanese children in Senegal and countries of origin. So they were supposed to work together to see uh, why is this happening, how should we make it not happen, and how can we support each other to ensure that children stay where they're supposed to be staying and they're well taken care of and not taken advantage of by any form of exploitation. Now, the next one was while complying with its reporting obligation under Article 43 of the Charter, they have to report. Uh, I think it's every 4 years. I have to confirm that. In fact, we are here already, so let's confirm together. They have to send an update of how they're doing to the committee according to Article 43, and every country does this. So it's reporting procedures. Every state party to the charter has to submit to the committee through the Secretary General of the AU within 2 years of entry into the charter, and therefore every other 3 years. So after every 3 years, you give an update of how you're doing on the rights of the child. Do you guys have free education? Why don't you have it? How is the right of health? Is it free for every child? Why not? Are you guys conducting FGM? We said this is not right. Why is that still going on? How many hospitals have you built? How many churches do you have that provide counseling for children? We said you guys should do counseling. Is this a religious thing? Like, every other aspect should be reported on. And this is such a serious issue. I know that for OPIC, they publicize their reporting, but for the African Charter, they do not publicize their reporting. And if they do, I'm going to find it if they did a report because I've searched everywhere on the internet, I've not found it. And if someone on the inside wants to send me a copy, I'd be so happy about that. And then they were supposed to report within 180 days to see if they've done everything that the committee said. And this happened on the 15th of April 2014. So it's been 10 years. I went online to see how Senegal is still doing, and they still have the same issue, but not at the same capacity. What I found was just educational articles of just people criticizing the decision of the committee, especially the go back home and do ABCD. They felt like some issues, like I've just explained, needed to be better elaborated. Like, when you say work with other organizations, what do you mean? Is someone connecting you guys? Is like, how is this gonna happen? But the government knows how they get deals done. So from the outsider perspective, you're like, hey, how are they going to do this? But it's the government. They have been working on deals since they become a government, so they're able to actually do this. Now that is the case of Senegal. I loved this case way too much. It broke my heart in several pieces, but it enlightened me. It enlightened me. It made me feel like maybe I actually want to do like a PhD or something, or maybe start writing papers on this. But then again, I am doing a podcast, I am doing a child version of this, and I am unemployed at the moment. Girl, I'm trying to not lose my mind. Every time you see me, I have a different hair color. Do you think I am sane? I am going insane. But um I digress. We will get out of the ghetto really soon. I am really, really, really passionate about the rights of children, especially the rights of children in Africa. And if I have to give it like my all to actually ensure that people actually know about this, that is exactly what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna see you when I see you. I will love you and leave you. See you and be kind to one another. If you have any questions, let me know. Remember, the child version is linked down below. And what else? My website is on www.miriamutisia.com. You can get every other resource about anything that I'm talking about. And if you want to connect more, find me on LinkedIn. My name is still the same. Girl, everything is linked in the description box. Leave a comment, share, subscribe, and be human. Be kind to one another. Love you and leave you.